for about 3 weeks before that. And I literally would not let it go. Everywhere I went, I was keeping hold of it because I knew this thing, if it disappeared, I'd be in a lot of trouble.
At 8:17 this morning, November 29th, something unprecedented happened. Prince William and Princess Catherine issued their first ever joint statement addressing a family matter, and the words they chose left no room for misinterpretation. We have become aware of a coordinated plan to undermine our family during the most sacred season. We will not remain silent while such actions threaten those we are bound to protect. The statement that changed everything. The statement appeared simultaneously across Kensington Palace's official channels, bearing both William and Catherine's names, a detail that immediately signaled extraordinary circumstances. In the entire modern history of the Wales family, Catherine had never co-signed a statement addressing family controversy. She had maintained her signature dignified silence through years of speculation, criticism, and provocation. But today, that silence broke. What made the moment so stunning was not simply the content, though the reference to a coordinated plan sent journalists scrambling for context. It was the unity, William and Catherine speaking with one voice, drawing a line together. The symbolism was impossible to miss. This was not William acting as future king while Catherine stood supportively in the background. This was a couple, partners, jointly defending their family against a threat they deemed serious enough to abandon their usual policy of rising above controversy. BBC interrupted its morning programming within minutes. The anchor, reading the statement live, paused noticeably at the phrase, "coordinated plan." "This is extraordinary language from Kensington Palace," she said, looking directly into the camera. "The Prince and Princess of Wales are publicly confirming they have discovered some kind of organized effort against them, and they are responding together in a way we have never seen before." Sky News assembled an emergency panel before 9 o'clock. Royal correspondents sat visibly shocked at the development. One veteran journalist who had covered the family for 30 years spoke what everyone was thinking. "Catherine never speaks publicly about family matters. Never. For her to co-sign this statement means whatever they discovered was severe enough to override every instinct toward privacy she has cultivated over 2 decades. Across the Atlantic, where dawn had just broken on the East Coast, American networks scrambled to understand what plan the statement referenced. CNN's breaking banner read, "William and Catherine accuse Meghan of secret campaign." CBS described it as the most direct accusation ever made by working royals against a family member in the modern era. Within 20 minutes of release, the statement had been shared more than 300,000 times across social media. Reactions split predictably along existing fault lines, but even those sympathetic to Meghan acknowledged that William and Catherine speaking together represented a seismic shift in royal family dynamics. Outside Kensington Palace, journalists who had been stationed there for routine coverage found themselves at the center of the biggest royal story in months. One reporter, bundled against the late November cold, spoke into her camera with barely contained excitement. "In all my years covering this family, I have never seen William and Catherine issue a joint statement about internal conflict. The fact that they felt compelled to do so tells us that whatever plan they discovered, it was serious enough to warrant breaking decades of protocol." Inside the palace walls, senior staff moved with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief because the decision to speak publicly had been debated, agonized over, and finally made. Apprehension because once such a statement goes public, the battle becomes overt rather than covert, and the consequences become unpredictable. What struck seasoned royal observers was the careful language. William and Catherine had not named Meghan explicitly, though the reference was unmistakable. They had not detailed the plan, leaving that mystery to drive speculation. But they had confirmed its existence, validated their awareness of it, and made clear they would defend against it. The statement walked a precise line between disclosure and discretion, between strength and restraint. For older British viewers, particularly those who remembered Diana's war with the palace playing out in devastating public fashion, the statement carried echoes of that painful era. but with one crucial difference. This time, the couple facing the challenge stood together, united, unshakable. In the United States, where Meghan's story had always resonated more deeply, the reaction was immediate and divided. Morning shows debated what plan could possibly justify such an unprecedented response from William and Catherine. Social media erupted with theories ranging from documentary projects to tell-all books to coordinated media campaigns. But beneath all the speculation, one truth emerged clearly. Whatever Meghan had been planning, William and Catherine had discovered it, and they were not going to allow it to proceed unchallenged. What exactly had they uncovered? What plan could be so threatening that it forced two people famous for their discretion to speak publicly for the first time together about family conflict? The answer, hidden in briefings shared only with senior palace officials and close family members, was more calculated, more comprehensive, and more personally targeted than almost anyone outside the inner circle could have imagined. The secret plan discovered. The discovery of Meghan's plan did not arrive through a single dramatic revelation. It emerged gradually through November, pieced together by palace intelligence teams monitoring media inquiries, tracking digital footprints, and paying attention to patterns that seemed, at first, merely coincidental. But by mid-month, those patterns had formed a picture too clear to dismiss. It began in early November, when Anne received an unusual briefing from the Royal Communications Monitoring Unit. They had detected a spike in media inquiries about Catherine, but these weren't the typical requests for comment on public engagements. These inquiries suggested inside knowledge of private matters, asked oddly specific questions about charitable decisions, and seemed designed to provoke responses that could be framed negatively. Anne, who had spent decades recognizing the early signs of coordinated media campaigns, immediately flagged the pattern to William. "Someone is planting stories," she told him during a private meeting at Windsor, "and they're doing it strategically, testing which narratives gain traction before committing to larger releases." William authorized a deeper investigation. What his team discovered over the following 2 weeks was more extensive than anyone expected. The inquiries traced back to a newly formed media production company based in California, one with documented connections to individuals in Meghan's professional circle. The company was apparently developing a documentary project with a working title that referenced "Untold Royal Truths" and "The Woman Who Threatened the Institution." But the documentary was only part of the strategy. Palace investigators, working through contacts in American publishing, learned that a book proposal was circulating simultaneously. The manuscript, described in pitch documents as a definitive corrective to royal narratives, would allegedly include previously undisclosed details about Catherine's role in Meghan's departure, suggesting behavior that ranged from coldness to active obstruction. What made the plan particularly sophisticated was its timing. Both the documentary and book were scheduled for release during the Christmas season, specifically timed to dominate media coverage during the period when the royal family traditionally unifies around shared celebration and public service. The messaging would frame Meghan as someone finally ready to reveal complete truth, positioned against Catherine, specifically as the figure who had made her royal life impossible. The third element of the plan was perhaps most insidious. Multiple American media outlets, particularly those catering to audiences sympathetic to Meghan, had been approached with coordinated talking points. The outlets would receive exclusive information, all releasing stories within a compressed time frame to create the appearance of organic validation. The stories would focus on Catherine's alleged emotional instability, her supposed jealousy of Meghan's initial popularity, and her claimed role in encouraging palace staff to make Meghan's life difficult. Catherine herself learned of the plan's details during a private briefing at Kensington Palace in mid-November. She listened in silence as communications advisors outlined what had been discovered. When they finished, she asked only one question: "How much of this targets our children indirectly through attacking my parenting?" The answer, delivered carefully, confirmed her fear. Several of the planned narrative elements would suggest that Catherine's focus on early childhood development stemmed from her own parenting anxieties, a subtle but unmistakable attack designed to undermine her most significant public work. William, sitting beside his wife during the briefing, felt something harden inside him. For years, he had absorbed provocations, media manipulation, and family tension while maintaining public silence. He had believed that dignity and restraint would eventually exhaust those seeking conflict. But this plan, this calculated multi-platform strategy specifically targeting Catherine during the Christmas season while attacking her work and implicitly questioning her parenting, crossed a line he could not ignore. Princess Anne's assessment, delivered during a follow-up meeting, was characteristically blunt. This is not a response to perceived grievances. This is warfare. And warfare requires a strategic response, not continued silence. But the element that truly stunned palace officials was the coordination involved. The documentary, book, and media campaign were apparently designed to reinforce each other, creating a narrative echo chamber that would make Meghan's version of events appear verified through multiple independent sources, even though all the sources traced back to the same origin point. King Charles, briefed on the plan's scope, reacted with visible distress. He had spent months hoping that time and distance would cool family tensions, learning that instead of cooling, those tensions had evolved into an organized public relations offensive targeting his daughter-in-law, specifically devastated him. During a private conversation with William, Charles admitted, "I wanted to believe reconciliation remained possible, but you cannot reconcile with someone actively planning to destroy another family member's reputation." The final confirmation of the plan's seriousness came from an unexpected source. A mid-level media executive, troubled by what they were being asked to participate in, quietly reached out to contacts who passed information to palace officials. The executive described being approached with what was framed as a justice project, designed to correct misconceptions about Meghan's royal experience. But as the executive reviewed materials, they realized the project was less about correcting misconceptions and more about constructing a narrative that painted Catherine as the villain in Meghan's story. By late November, William and Catherine faced a decision. They could maintain their traditional silence, allowing the plan to unfold and responding reactively as each element launched. Or they could break precedent, acknowledge the plan's existence publicly, and preemptively undermine its credibility by revealing it as a coordinated effort rather than organic truth-telling. The decision, once they truly understood what they were facing, was not difficult. Catherine, who had never wanted to engage in public family conflict, recognized that protecting her children and her life's work required abandoning her preference for privacy. And William, who had always shielded his wife from the worst of royal infighting, understood that this time, strength would come not from protecting her in silence, but from standing beside her in public unity. The three warnings ignored. Before William and Catherine made their unprecedented decision to speak publicly, the palace attempted three separate interventions designed to halt Meghan's plan without public confrontation. Each warning was delivered with increasing urgency. Each was ignored or dismissed. And each failure pushed William closer to the conclusion that private diplomacy had exhausted its effectiveness. The first warning came in early November, delivered through the only channel still occasionally functional between the Wales and Sussex households, a carefully worded message sent through Harry. The communication, drafted by William personally, was direct but not hostile. It informed Harry that the palace had become aware of media projects in development that seemed designed to attack Catherine specifically, and requested that he use his influence to ensure such projects did not proceed. William chose his words carefully. He did not accuse Meghan directly. He did not threaten consequences. He simply stated facts the palace knew, and asked Harry, as a brother and father who understood the importance of protecting family, to intervene. The message ended with a line William had debated including but ultimately felt necessary. Some boundaries, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. I hope we can avoid reaching that point. Harry's response, received 3 days later, was defensive and dismissive. He denied knowledge of any coordinated plan, suggested the palace was being paranoid, and accused William of continuing to view Meghan through a lens of suspicion rather than giving her the benefit of doubt. The response contained no acknowledgement that he would investigate or intervene. It simply rejected the premise that anything problematic was occurring. William shared Harry's response with Catherine, who read it silently before saying quietly, "He either doesn't know or he doesn't want to know. Either way, we cannot rely on him to stop this." The second warning, delivered in mid-November, took a more formal approach. Palace legal advisors sent a cease and desist letter to the California-based production company developing the documentary. The letter, carefully crafted to avoid escalating conflict while establishing a legal record, noted that the palace had reason to believe the project would include false claims about members of the royal family, specifically Catherine. The letter did not threaten immediate legal action. Instead, it requested transparency about the project's content and warned that the palace would vigorously defend against defamatory material. It asked for a meeting to discuss concerns before the project advanced further. The tone was professional, measured, designed to create dialogue rather than confrontation. The production company's response, delivered through their attorneys, was equally formal, but essentially dismissive. They stated that the project was protected speech, that all content would be properly sourced, and that they had no obligation to submit materials for palace review prior to release. The response did not address the specific concern about false claims regarding Catherine. It simply asserted the right to proceed. When William reviewed the production company's response, he recognized immediately that legal warnings would not stop the plan. The company believed, probably correctly, that any actual defamation lawsuit would take years to resolve and generate more publicity than the palace wanted. They were proceeding with confidence that the palace's traditional reluctance to engage in protracted public legal battles would protect them from meaningful consequences. The third and final warning came from the most unexpected source: King Charles himself. In late November, Charles drafted a personal letter to Meghan. The letter, which palace officials later described as heartfelt and vulnerable, did not threaten or accuse. Instead, it appealed to shared humanity and family connection. Charles wrote about his hopes for family peace. He acknowledged that mistakes had been made on all sides during Meghan's time as a working royal. He expressed understanding that she might feel hurt or misunderstood, but he also asked, directly and plainly, that she not pursue actions that would cause deliberate harm to Catherine, who had always tried to welcome her and who was now raising 3 young children while managing significant public responsibilities. The letter's final paragraph reportedly stated, "I have lost too much already to family division. I do not wish to lose more. But I cannot stand by while one member of my family orchestrates the destruction of another's reputation. I am asking you, as your father-in-law who wishes you well, to choose a different path." Charles sent the letter through secure diplomatic channels to ensure it reached Meghan directly. He waited 2 weeks for a response. None came. The silence itself was an answer, one that confirmed for Charles what William had already concluded. Meghan had decided that pursuing her plan mattered more than preserving any remaining family relationships. When William learned that even his father's personal appeal had been ignored, he felt the last constraint on his own response dissolve. He had tried private communication. The palace had tried legal warnings. Charles had tried heartfelt pleading. Every avenue for avoiding public confrontation had been exhausted. And the plan, according to continued intelligence monitoring, was proceeding toward its planned Christmas season launch. During a late November evening at Kensington Palace, William and Catherine sat together reviewing the timeline of failed warnings. Catherine, who had hoped until the end that private resolution might be possible, finally acknowledged what William had already accepted. "She's not going to stop." Catherine said quietly. "And if we don't defend ourselves publicly, the narrative she creates will become the narrative everyone believes." William took his wife's hand. "Then we speak, together. Not with anger, but with clarity. We confirm that we know what's being planned, and we make clear that we won't allow it to proceed without response." It was the decision that would lead to the unprecedented joint statement released at 8:17 on the morning of November 29th. The three ignored warnings had proven that private diplomacy could not stop what was coming. Only public acknowledgement could preemptively undermine a plan that depended on appearing organic rather than coordinated. Catherine's breaking point. Throughout her years as Princess of Wales, Catherine had absorbed extraordinary pressure with remarkable grace. She had endured constant comparison to Diana. She had navigated pregnancy announcements becoming global news. She had raised 3 children under microscopic scrutiny. She had built a body of serious work around early childhood development while tabloids focused on her wardrobe. Through it all, she had maintained an almost superhuman composure, rarely showing strain, never publicly complaining, embodying the royal ideal of service without self-pity. But the discovery of Meghan's plan, particularly its personal targeting of her and indirect attacks on her parenting, reached something deeper than professional dignity. It touched her identity as a mother, as a woman who had dedicated years to understanding child development, and as someone who had always tried, however imperfectly, to be kind to Meghan during her brief time as a working royal. The breaking point came during a private conversation with William in late November. They were at Adelaide Cottage, their Windsor residence, with their children asleep upstairs. Catherine had spent the day reviewing the full intelligence briefing on Meghan's plan, including the specific narrative elements that would question her emotional stability and suggest her early childhood work stemmed from personal inadequacy rather than genuine commitment. "I have never responded publicly to anything said about me," Catherine told William, her voice steady but strained. "I have let people make assumptions, spread lies, create entire fictional versions of who I am. I accepted that as part of the role. But this is different. This isn't tabloid speculation. This is a calculated campaign designed to destroy credibility. I have spent 15 years building work that matters to me, that helps actual children." William listened silently, recognizing that his wife had reached a threshold she had never approached before. Catherine continued, her composure beginning to crack. "And it is targeting me specifically because someone knows that attacking you directly would be too obvious. But attacking me damages the family while appearing to settle personal scores. I am being used as a proxy for institutional criticism, and my silence, which I thought was dignified, has apparently been interpreted as weakness." She paused, looking directly at her husband. "Our children will grow up reading these things. George, Charlotte, Louis, they will see articles questioning whether their mother was cruel to their aunt, whether I drove her away, whether my work is compensation for personal failure. I cannot let that narrative stand unchallenged." It was the most direct expression of personal pain William had heard from Catherine regarding family conflict in their entire marriage. She was not asking for his permission to respond. She was telling him that her silence, the protective shield she had maintained for so long, had finally reached its limit. William felt something shift inside him. For years, he had been the one wanting to confront provocations while Catherine counseled patience and dignity. Now their positions had reversed. Catherine, pushed beyond her considerable tolerance, was ready to abandon her preference for privacy. And William, seeing his wife's pain, felt his own resolve harden into something unshakable. "Then we respond," he said. "Not with anger, not with detailed rebuttals, but we acknowledge that we know what's being planned, and we make clear that we stand together against it." The decision to issue a joint statement, unprecedented in their public life together, emerged from that conversation. Catherine was not asking William to defend her. She was joining him in defending their family, their children's future, and the work she had built through years of quiet, consistent effort. Princess Anne, when informed of William and Catherine's decision to speak publicly together, offered unexpected support. She had always respected Catherine's discretion, but she also recognized that discretion had limits. During a brief conversation at Windsor, Anne told Catherine directly, "You have shown remarkable restraint for years. No one could question your patience, but there comes a point when silence enables those who would harm you. Speaking now, together with William, is not a failure of dignity, it is a necessary assertion of truth." Queen Camilla's response was equally supportive, though more personal. She understood intimately what it meant to be targeted by coordinated campaigns designed to destroy reputation. During a private tea at Clarence House, Camilla told Catherine, "I waited too long to defend myself, believing that engagement with attackers only elevated their importance. I was wrong. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself, and for those who support you, is to acknowledge that you are under attack and that you will not accept it quietly." The drafting of the joint statement took several days. William and Catherine worked with communications advisors to find language that was strong without being inflammatory, clear without being detailed, unified without being defensive. Every word was weighed against multiple criteria: accuracy, necessity, dignity, and impact. Catherine insisted on one specific element: the statement must reference protection of family. "This cannot appear to be about my ego or reputation," she told William. "It must be clear that we are defending our family unit, our children's future, and the boundaries that protect all of us." By the evening of November 28th, the final version was complete. William and Catherine reviewed it together one last time. Catherine, reading the words that would represent her first public acknowledgement of family conflict in her entire royal life, felt a mixture of sadness and resolve. Sadness that it had come to this. Resolve that she would not allow those she loved to be damaged by coordinated attacks they had done nothing to deserve. "Are you certain?" William asked gently, giving her one final opportunity to reconsider. Catherine looked at her husband, the future king, the father of her children, her partner through every challenge they had faced. "I am certain," she said. "We protect what matters, and right now, that means speaking." At 8:17 the next morning, their unprecedented joint statement would go public, and Catherine, who had spent 15 years proving that strength could be quiet, would demonstrate that sometimes strength must also be vocal. The public response and fallout. The statement released at 8:17 on November 29th created immediate and sustained reaction across multiple continents. Within the first hour, it had been viewed more than 2 million times. Within 3 hours, it dominated every major news cycle. And by midday, it had fundamentally altered the landscape of royal family dynamics in ways that would be analyzed for years to come. In Britain, the public response was overwhelmingly supportive. Polling conducted by major news organizations within hours of the statement's release showed that 73% of respondents supported William and Catherine's decision to speak publicly about coordinated attacks. Among viewers over 50, support reached 81%. BBC received thousands of calls and messages, the vast majority praising the couple for finally drawing a clear boundary. One caller, a woman from Manchester in her 60s, captured the prevailing sentiment. "Catherine has been nothing but dignified for 15 years. If she and William felt they had to speak publicly, then what was being planned must have been truly awful. I'm glad they're defending themselves." Social media response in the UK skewed similarly positive. Hashtags supporting William and Catherine trended throughout the day. The phrase "coordinated plan," taken directly from their statement, became shorthand for what many viewed as Meghan's ongoing campaign against the working royals. In the United States, reactions divided more sharply along existing fault lines, but even there, the unprecedented nature of William and Catherine speaking together shifted some perspectives. Morning show panels debated what could have driven two people famous for discretion to break their silence so dramatically. Even commentators sympathetic to Meghan acknowledged that the joint statement represented a significant escalation that suggested serious provocation. One CBS analyst offered an observation that gained wide circulation. In royal terms, William and Catherine speaking together about family conflict is the equivalent of launching a nuclear option. They don't do this lightly. They don't do this for minor grievances. Whatever plan they discovered, it was significant enough to override every instinct toward privacy they've cultivated. Inside Kensington Palace, staff described an atmosphere of relief mixed with anxiety. Relief that the decision to speak had been made and executed. Anxiety about what response might come from California and what the next phase of this public conflict might look like. But it was the reaction from California that perhaps revealed most about the statement's impact. Harry, according to sources close to the couple, was blindsided by the joint statement. He had dismissed William's earlier private warning as paranoia. Now, seeing William and Catherine publicly confirm a coordinated plan, he apparently realized that palace intelligence had uncovered far more than he understood about projects Meghan had been developing. His response, described by those who spoke with him in the hours after the statement's release, was a mixture of shock, defensiveness, and growing concern that Meghan's strategy had been exposed before it could launch. The plan's effectiveness had depended on appearing organic, on revelations seeming to emerge naturally through documentary and book rather than as orchestrated campaign. William and Catherine's statement had preemptively undermined that appearance. Meghan's own response was notable for its absence. No statement emerged from her representatives, no social media posts appeared. The silence suggested either strategic calculation about how to respond or genuine surprise that the plan had been discovered and exposed before implementation. Either way, her silence created a vacuum that was quickly filled by others' interpretations. Palace officials, speaking anonymously to trusted royal correspondents, began providing carefully calibrated context. They confirmed that the coordinated plan referenced in William and Catherine's statement involved multiple media projects timed for Christmas release. They indicated that the projects specifically targeted Catherine in ways designed to undermine her charitable work and personal reputation. And they made clear that the decision to speak publicly came only after private attempts to halt the projects had failed. Princess Anne, when asked for comment during a public engagement, offered her characteristic brevity. "The Prince and Princess of Wales have made their position clear. I support them entirely." It was vintage Anne, saying everything by saying almost nothing, but leaving no doubt about her stance. King Charles, navigating the difficult position of father to both William and Harry, issued no public statement. But palace sources indicated he had been consulted before the joint statement was released and had given his authorization, a detail that suggested his own patience with Sussex-related disruption had finally been exhausted. By late afternoon, the media landscape had shifted decisively. What might have launched as Meghan's narrative about royal family dysfunction had instead become a story about William and Catherine defending themselves against coordinated attacks. The projects that had been in development now faced scrutiny not as truth-telling but as potentially orchestrated campaigns. Several media outlets that had apparently been approached with advance information began reconsidering their planned coverage. The revelation that they might be participating in a coordinated effort, rather than reporting organic developments, created editorial concerns that complicated the original plans. As evening fell over London, one truth had emerged clearly. William and Catherine's unprecedented joint statement had accomplished exactly what they intended. It had acknowledged the threat they faced, demonstrated their unity in responding to it, and preemptively undermined the credibility of projects that depended on appearing independent rather than coordinated. The cost of that accomplishment, however, was significant. The statement had made explicit what had previously been implicit. The family division was not healing but deepening. Reconciliation, if it had ever been possible, seemed increasingly distant. And the battle, now public rather than private, would unfold with consequences no one could fully predict. What this means going forward, as November 29th drew toward evening, and the full impact of William and Catherine's statement began settling into the public consciousness. A new chapter in royal family dynamics had clearly begun. Not a chapter about reconciliation or healing, but about boundaries, protection, and the lengths to which people will go to defend what matters most when all other options have been exhausted. The immediate practical implications were significant. The documentary and book projects Meghan had been developing now faced an environment fundamentally different from what had been anticipated. Instead of launching into a receptive media landscape curious about untold truths, they would launch into a context where their coordination had been publicly acknowledged and their targeting of Catherine specifically had been confirmed. Media outlets that might have promoted the projects uncritically would now face questions about whether they were participating in what William and Catherine had explicitly called a coordinated plan. The projects could still proceed, certainly, but their impact had been diminished before they even reached the public, their credibility questioned before a single page had been read or frame viewed. For William and Catherine, the statement represented a fundamental shift in how they would approach family conflict going forward. For 15 years, Catherine had embodied dignified silence as response to provocation. That era had ended. The joint statement established a precedent. There were boundaries that, when crossed, would trigger public defense rather than private absorption. Palace officials, briefing trusted correspondents, made clear that the statement was not simply reactive, but also preventive. It served notice that future attempts to coordinate campaigns against working royals, particularly Catherine, would be met with public exposure rather than quiet endurance. The days of assuming royal silence equaled royal acceptance had conclusively ended. From my own perspective, watching this unfold from a distance, I found myself reflecting on the nature of boundaries and the moment when silence transforms from strength into vulnerability. Catherine had shown extraordinary restraint for years, believing that dignity lay in rising above provocations. But there comes a point in every conflict when continued silence enables those who would cause harm, when restraint is mistaken for weakness, and when speaking becomes not a failure of composure but an assertion of truth. William and Catherine's decision to speak together demonstrated something profound about partnership. This was not William defending his wife while she remained silent. This was a couple jointly determining that their family's protection required abandoning their preference for privacy. That unity, that shared resolve, carried power that individual statements could never match. For the monarchy as an institution, the joint statement marked an evolution in crisis management. Previous generations might have allowed such situations to unfold, believing that royal dignity required never acknowledging attacks directly. But William and Catherine had chosen a different path, one that recognized that in the digital age, silence can be weaponized by those coordinating campaigns, and that preemptive transparency sometimes serves better than reactive denial. The lesson for all of us, royal watchers or not, is both simple and profound. Protecting what you love sometimes requires doing things that make you uncomfortable. Catherine had never wanted to engage in public family conflict. That preference for privacy was genuine and long-standing. But when faced with coordinated efforts to undermine her work, attack her character, and indirectly target her children, she chose protection over comfort. That choice required courage, different from the courage she had shown through years of silent dignity. Thank you for staying with this story. In the end, William and Catherine's statement was not about attacking anyone. It was about protecting everyone they were responsible for. And sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do, the most necessary thing, is to stop absorbing harm in silence and start naming it aloud. Not with cruelty, not with vengeance, but with the clear, calm certainty that some boundaries must be defended, even when defending them costs us the comfort of continued quiet.